My dad immigrated to America when he was probably 20 years old from Ireland. He was an ink maker, worked for Higgins Ink in Brooklyn for 45 years. My mother went to teachers training school and taught and then worked at Brooklyn College in administration. My mother said her only recollection of her father was when she was like 5 years old, and they lived in Washington, D.C., and her father, who would be my grandfather, she said was a shadow in a window of Bethesda Naval Hospital. He had been in the Marine Corps, and he died there when she was about 5 years old. But he had actually fought in the Spanish-American War, 1899, and was part of the occupation forces in Cuba. My grandmother actually took a ship to Cuba, and they were married at the cathedral in Havana, Cuba. But that's the military history of which I was not familiar with, other than to hear about it from my mother. Well, I went to St. Gregory's grade school in Brooklyn, went to St. Augustine's High School in Brooklyn. Then I went to a year of Manhattan College in the Bronx, 242nd Street in the Bronx. Then I knew I wanted to go to West Point the following year, so I took some courses at NYU downtown Manhattan. And then in 1960, I went to West Point for 4 years and graduated from there in 1964. After I graduated, I went to Fort Benning. I was in the infantry, went to the airborne school, and then after that, while still at Fort Benning, went to the Ranger School at Fort Benning. Then went to Fort Lewis, Washington with the 4th Infantry Division, and was a platoon leader at Fort Lewis. While there, I was there 2 years. We knew, the war was heating up. They sent me to Panama. I went to Jungle Warfare School, came back, and became a company commander, infantry company commander at Fort Lewis, Washington. We were told we would train and retain and deploy. And what that meant was we had kind of a cadre. I was the company commander. We had platoon leaders, platoon sergeants, and then we received about 250 draftees who had just finished their basic training from really all over the states. They came to us at Fort Lewis. We took them through AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training, and then we retained them, and we spent about 3 or 4 months really living in the field, preparing for Vietnam. And then we, as an entire unit, went to Billingham, Washington, just north out of Fort Lewis, Washington, boarded the USS General Walker, and sailed from Billingham, Washington. I think it took like 24, 25 days to Vietnam, with one stop for refueling in Okinawa. We landed in country in early 1966. We had no idea what to expect, and we actually went over the side of the ship into a landing barge, and when we arrived, it was on the east coast of Vietnam, I think by Da Nang in the southern part of Vietnam. We knew we were going into the central highlands right on the Cambodian border. So it was a temporary thing, but we had no idea what to expect. As we got into the barges and came onto shore, the 4th Infantry Division band was there playing for us. And we were carrying weapons with magazines, and we thought, this is, somebody didn't get the word, So then we flew, I think a C-45 transport from probably Da Nang to Pleiku, and up north in the Central Highlands, and then 2.5-ton trucks took us from Pleiku to a base camp, which we established at the Kateca Tea Plantation, which was west of Pleiku, nearer to the Cambodian border. The funny thing about it was we spent 2 weeks there, And then we went and we never saw it again. Well, that's not true. We came back for 1 week at Christmas time when Bob Hope had flown in, and we went back to the base camp. But the entire year, we were in the base camp for a total of 3 weeks. When I went to Vietnam, I was still a first lieutenant, and we landed in Vietnam around the end of June, and I was promoted to captain about 6 months later, after 6 months in country. I looked as my responsibility to get as many of these young men back home whole as possible. What sticks in my mind, I can remember being told, we want you to get to this point, which had no tactical significance. And I said, I'm stopping at 4 o'clock, and I'm digging foxholes. And I had an artillery forward observer who was, he didn't leave my side. And we'd spend probably an hour and a half, 2 hours putting in, they call them DEFCONs, defensive concentrations, and you'd walk artillery in. You'd start it out maybe 400 meters to the north, then you'd walk it back till it was maybe 100 meters in front of your frontline position. Then you'd start to the east, start it out 400 meters and walk it back till it was about, and you do that in around your entire perimeter. And you'd tell the artillery FO to mark it, that's A, and mark it, that's B, so that if you got hit during the night, and you got hit during the night, you tell them, A, and then drop, 100, drop 200, drop 300. And and that took a long time. And I wanted my men to be in foxholes, and I wanted to have defensive concentrations in. And to me, that was, that's the only way to fight a war, particularly a war like that in the jungle, because we didn't call the shots. The North Vietnamese regulars called the shots. When they wanted to engage us, they would engage us. They knew exactly where we were. We didn't know where they were. When they wanted to initiate contact, they initiated contact. You would medevac people out for various reasons, and it might take, weeks before you got replacements. Everybody gets sick. Everybody gets malaria, everybody gets punji. It's a piece of bamboo sharpened at the end, dipped in feces, stuck in the ground. And they would pierce your combat boot. They were that strong and sharp. And if you got stuck by that, it'd be infected like that. And you're in a hot, humid, damp, area. You'd have to get it treated. Everybody gets injured. People go back on R&R, people get killed. And my company, probably in the field, never got below 150. After I was 6 months in Vietnam as a company commander, then I became an S2. But I remember I was A company first of the 12th, B company first of the 12th. Right at the time I was coming back to the States, got overrun. And they were only their company strength, because we all went over together as a battalion, as a brigade actually. We all had the same company strength, but they only had 60 people in the field. Imagine that. That's after being in country about a year. Then I became S2, intelligence officer. And at that level, at battalion level, really what an intelligence officer did. You probably heard of LRRPs, LRRP. Long-range reconnaissance patrols. We'd get information from the really 4-man patrols, and we would put LRRPs out. We would insert them where we thought the enemy might be, and then we would pick them up. They'd be out for several days at a time, and we'd pick them up all by themselves. The poor devils. My pulse, went bing when I had to insert them, because you were inserting in enemy territory. There was no other Americans around. And then you'd usually have to pick them out when they were engaged in a firefight. They'd call in, you'd have to go in and get them and pull them out. I was the guy who put them in, so I felt, especially responsible. And I would go, and we would land and put them in, and then I would go and remove them in a chopper. I got shot down twice in helicopters, and it was they would shoot out the hydraulics. I was lucky because one was we came into a hot LZ, and this is as a company commander, and they would shoot out the hydraulics, and you could not go up and down anymore unless you were moving laterally at 60, 70 miles an hour. You would actually, it was like a plane. And I mean, we just went like that on the in the LZ. But fortunately, you know, it was we were moving into a new area, and I had my whole company with me, and it disabled the LZ for a part of it, and disabled the helicopter. But there were all sorts of other Americans with us, and we had artillery support and all that. The second time, I forget what we were doing, and it could have been that I was inserting a LRP, but we were able to go back to where the helicopter originated, and I can remember there'd be, you'd land on these steel helipads, and coming in at like 60 miles an hour, because it could no longer go up and down and just on skids, middle skids, popping along like that. And I've never been in another helicopter since those days. And I finished my tour in Vietnam in 1967, June of 67, yeah. By the time I left Vietnam, and I'm talking 1967, it was clear to me that, you know, this is not a winnable war, you know, this is not a winnable war. I'm back, I get malaria, I get married, I'm stationed in Alabama, July of 67 to January of 68, and I'm told that they want me to go to Thailand and be an advisor to the kind of a special forces unit and the 2nd Royal Thai Army in northeast Thailand. If you look at the map, that part of Thailand is closer to Hanoi than anywhere else. Yeah, and it's on the Mekong River. And I said, yeah, I mean, I'd do that. So they sent me. It was probably because they were going to send me to Thai language school. So they sent me to Washington D.C. to the Defense Language Institute, DLI, to learn Thai. And that was 9 months. And then they sent me to Thailand in January of 1969. I had my son was born in January of 1969, our first child, and I went to Thailand 1 week after he was born. And my wife came back to Dubuque, and I went to Thailand. I can remember it was like minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit the day I left, and I landed in Bangkok, and it was like 110 degrees in Bangkok. But then I went up country. I flew to Korat, which is kind of middle of Thailand, and then from there I went up to, could have flown up to an airbase called Nakhon Phanom, and then I was staying with the Thais. It was just me and another American, and we lived with the Thais. We either stayed at Rumchichai, or there was an engineering battalion, which was about 20 miles away from us, that were building roads in there because they were American airfields. I advised a lot of units there in Thailand, but one of the units was a Thai Special Forces unit, and they were providing security to a base called Nakhon Phanom, NKP. And from Nakhon Phanom, Jolly Green Giants would fly into North Vietnam and pluck up downed American airmen. And they would then bring them back to NKP, and part of their ceremony was to feed this down flyer a lot of alcohol, grab his arms and legs, and throw him over the bar. Yeah, I know. That was a ceremony they did. I thought, oh man, the poor devils probably get more hurt, you know, from that ceremony. But I used to love to go to NKP, because then I would get a meal, a hot meal, and I would get a shower. Because that was, but I would only go up maybe once a month, you know. A fellow, James Powers from Dubuque, Iowa, who I had gone to West Point with. At West Point, they line you up alphabetically, you know. I'm Q, he's P, he's in front of me. And he's one of the first people I met in what they call Beast Barracks. It's your first summer at the military academy. And then He became a company commander at West Point. I became a company commander at West Point. We went to airborne school together. We roomed together out there. We went to Ranger school together. We were Ranger buddies. We went to Fort Lewis, Washington together, and we roomed together at Fort Lewis, Washington. He met a young co-ed at the University of Washington. We were at a football game, and in December of 1965, he married her. And again, I was there as well, and of course we were all at the wedding. And then we deployed together to Vietnam. And he was a general's aide, and he could pretty much have remained a general's aide in Vietnam. And he decided, no, I'm trained to lead people. And after 6 months, he did get a company. Before he took over the company, he met his wife on R&R in Hawaii. She became pregnant, and he came back from Hawaii on R&R, took over the company, and then at the end of May, it was about 2 months before his tour was to end and my tour was to end, he was killed in an ambush, in North Vietnamese ambush as a company commander. And his wife, Ann Reynolds from state of Washington, asked, would I, since my tour was just about over, would I accompany his remains back to the state of Washington? But I remember meeting up with his remains at Graves Registration in Oakland, California. And it was a week that over 500 Americans had been killed in Vietnam. And I remember walking into this auditorium and looking at all these flag-draped coffins, and it just take your breath away. I mean, just take your breath away. But anyway, we boarded a train then in Oakland and went north up to Mount Vernon, Washington, where Ann lived, and Jim was buried. Before I actually left to Thailand, I had gone to the University of Iowa, and we were trying. My wife and I were weighing, okay, where do we want to go to law school? I had kind of committed. I think I'd like to go to law school. So we decided, okay, let's do it in Iowa. Let's go to school in Iowa. It was cheaper. I became a resident in 1967 when I got married, and so in the spring of 1970, I entered law school at Iowa. And I graduated in 1973, and upon graduation, I was commissioned to the JAG Corps. The time at school, it counted as time in service for retirement. It counted time towards promotion, because while I was in law school, I became a major. They didn't pay you. You got the GI Bill. So we had our second child before I started. We had our third child in my during exams of my first year of law school. But I remember we were getting $150 a month. But if I could string together a couple of weeks, I could work and be paid for the Army, and I would commute from Iowa City to Rock Island Arsenal in the procurement office. So I'd work there the entire summer. I'd work at Thanksgiving. I'd work at Christmas. Anytime I could put a couple of weeks together. But when I graduated then from law school, I was then assigned to Virginia, the University of Virginia, where you'd go to the JAG career course right at the University of Virginia Law School. And spent a year there and then 2 years as a JAG officer in New Jersey. Got out of the service in 1976 after 12 years, and came to Dubuque and went to work at law firm O'Connor and Thomas here in Dubuque, and worked with them for 40 years.